Hello, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Let's play chess. Sure. Interesting game. I'm going to go over this game in detail now and share my thoughts about both White's moves and Black's moves, strategies, and so on. Okay. Okay, I had the white pieces. E4, E5, King's Gambit accepted. And as I advised in the King's Gambit, the move is 3, Knight, F3. In almost any kind of King's Gambit, that's what you want to be doing. Let's see if Torch agrees. The computer Torch indicates that there's more moves than that. 3, Knight F3 is definitely with it. Note too that Knight F3 works if the Gambit is declined. And Knight goes to Knight F3, whether the Gambit's declined or accepted. Bishop C4 is the usual placement for White's light squared bishop in the King's Gambit. It's really hard to find another square for the bishop, but C4 does quite well. B5 would have the bishop pushed back by C6, and E2 is just way too passive for a gambit opening to have your bishop sitting here on E2 and not aimed at Black's king side, especially F7. Bishop H4. I don't come across this very often. This is a book move, but this is either new to me or almost new to me in my playing. I thought G3 after some time. I took about 15 seconds for this move, and I thought G3 kind of did well for White, right? The bishop has to decide what it's doing. If the pawn captures, then it gets a little bit complicated. This is what happened in the game. I think Castle's kingside was right thereafter. But what are we thinking? Bishop H4 check. And then the response G3. Torch has the computer ahead. I think the textbook response is King F1. And then there's some sort of, in one of these, there's a forced draw. I'll have to look into it, and I'll do that. But I didn't want to place my king unable to castle. And it's not clear that White has anything after King F1. So G3 is a little bit more challenging and direct. My opponent has 2 pawns to the better, but I had this nifty idea in place, King H1, using the pawn as shelter. You can see that's a book move. It's been played before. Here I came up with it independently. I will assert, and it's, the king's actually not all that bad there. Shielded by the enemy pawn. The active the most active or soon to be active black pieces. Um, that's a, the queen's on a dark square. Black's bishop is a dark squared bishop. I'm not all that worried about this knight getting into the fray all that quickly and helping things. Not right now. So, this bishop on c8. d5. Bishop takes d5. Bishop e6 is a blunder. I didn't punish the blunder. I didn't find the move, so that's a miss for me. And it looks like the one good move is bishop takes b7, of course, because the rook falls next. So we'll just show that here on Practice vs. Computer. I was thinking a lot into a kingside attack, moving this pawn out of place, and then could we pair a capture on h4 with queen to h5 check, and I blundered. A miss as a blunder to capture whatever I did. I should have played bishop takes b7. Then we follow it by capturing the rook, and white's doing really well here. I mean, isn't white also able to capture the bishop and then block a check? Okay, so black recoups the material, but all of a sudden queen f3 was a blunder. Queen f3 because it allows the capture of the knight. Well, white's better off blocking. If I, little old me, can play well against Torch 4, then that proves the efficacy of bishop takes b7. I think we have enough to play rook g3. This pawn grab is tempting, but I'm going to favor development in this instance. That bishop is strong. We're going to trade off a couple pieces for simplification. No, okay, that wasn't good enough. Let's go back. So instead of trading off pieces and pushing d5, we'll capture the pawn on c7. I'm not what's the wording? I'm not all that crazy about that. Play bishop to e5, captures. here. Yes. This makes sense. It's an odd way to liquidate, but now white has the win. This is now a matter of technique. I'll put the knight on a square where he's safe from attack. So I want to talk a little bit about tempting moves. It's tempting to say knight to d5, right? The rook can't attack because d6 is covered by the pawn. But be careful, my friends. Rook to c5, I think, is the better counter move for black. And it's not clear then that the knight can so easily find protection on d5. Yeah, you can backpedal to c3. I dig, but be careful about dismissing the counterattack before you've exhausted the options of your opponent's pieces. I guess something like that. So we'll look at this at knight to d5, and my opponent just decides to counterattack with his king. Knight has to move, and then the pawn becomes black's pawn. So, sort of eating my own words there, but the message is clear. Not to get too amped up by the fact that the most natural way to attack that knight is covered. There is also rook c5 and king e6. I stick with this move. No, I don't. It's not. Yeah. We can't move to the second rank. We'll get pinned. We might move to the second rank to g2 and get pinned, but not worry as much about it. h5 is kind of out of the way and not all that happy. It's also actually not that bad because the next move could be g6, knight to f6, and we've got a mini pawn chain plus some protection for a knight that's as advanced as the 6th rank. Let's try that. Nope, because maybe this is something a little bit pot in the kettle, because if I try moving knight to h5, then I get pinned from that direction. I think knight to g2 is good. Let's see what the hint is from the computer. Hint likes knight to h3, right? My thinking here was what's to stop rook h6 and then pawn to g4. Let's actually force that in and see. Rook to g6. Now white can unpin with king to g3. These other moves unpin, but not in a good enough way. Or white can play rook to g1, I suppose. King g6, pawn to e6, so that if the king moves over to capture the pawn before the pawn queens, then we eventually get black's g5 pawn. That looks pretty good. Let's try that. Rook to g1. Torch has decided to let the pawn go away let the pawn go away earlier and sort of more naturally. And it's not clear that That was anything but a good move. What did we see? I want to know what Rook G1 was considered excellent. So I'm okay. Torch and I are on the same page on that. I'm contemplating Rook F5, except that the king seems to be too active on E6. Rook's under attack, so something has to change. I could play Rook G3. Rook F5 is a move, but like I said, the king becomes too active there. G3. And the only other move that makes sense is Rook to G2. Okay. A bit of tactics here. Okay, I see it. I don't. Would I pick this up in a game? Maybe. In a long game, probably. The idea: King to G3. Black can't capture on G5 because Knight takes G5 with check. Wherever the king moves, White will recoup the lost rook, and then it's all over based on how many pawns there are. So rather than that, Torch has decided, or Maximum has decided, Rook to D4, Rook to D4. Get Rook to F5 is a flexible move. With my rook on F5, I can help protect against pushes on the H file. My opponent was in check. He gives me the initiative for even more flexibility. I can block checks on the F file. So I thought that was a good flexible move. I do not want to see Rook takes D3, but is there anything more compelling? Maybe Rook F6 check, King takes E5, Rook takes H6, Rook takes D3, King to G4, and we're doing well. So let's try that. Okay. That's good enough. I have to go for a sec. Let's see, you all, if you want to figure out why is Rook to F6, no, yeah, why is Rook to F6 check not the right move? Okay, I don't know, we'll be back in a minute. friends. We gotta find a different move other than rook f6 check. I'll say it. Yeah, rook f3. No. Let's use a hint. Now we're into some kind of mostly technical endgame. Alright, George. I think we were here. Go back to the original game. That was all on stemming off of that early miss. We see that going through this, I'm going to go through this a little bit on the quicker side here. See that White's task is to recoup a lot of material and avoid trades and attack Black's king. Isn't that kind of mostly the thing? Yeah. Sad to see that knight to f7 wasn't a good move here for White. So let's take a look what might have been better. Queen f7 check. We'll play that out. Yes, not all the way to the end, but what? Queen to f7 check. The king's trying to escape, but I was trying to calculate this line. Knight to c4 check. I couldn't quite get it from here. I couldn't quite tell where to move next. The king's in peril. I suppose queen takes e6 makes sense. Capturing a pawn and keeping this important knight where he is, allowing the knight on b1 to enter with more panache and impact than otherwise. You can't lose this knight as an attacking piece. There's no material immediately for grabs here for white. Up for grabs here for white. I don't see. Maybe b3, and is then the king is almost held in place. He can move to b4, but even that looks really dangerous because of bishop to a3 check. Open things up if I capture on e6. I can also break towards the center here. The king can also break towards the center here. b3 and d4 is still an option. Let's try the queen first. These I can't. It's too close for me to talk. Queen takes e6 is best, so it's at least excellent. b4 check. Next up, let's say probably bishop to a3 check. We can move knight to c3, not because of the check so much as to clear the b file and use our rooks to attack. And now I think pawn takes c3 shows that black soon enough is going to completely run out of squares. Yeah, in a game we would play knight takes a5. Wow, what a great game that would have been. So back to the game. You know, in the time pressure of a game in 10 minutes, I decided to play with a very active queen. I wasn't all that expectant of victory until about here. I started to get pieces developing with tempo. Isn't that nice? And then I'm in check, but I can respond by blocking and levying a check. blocking the check from the queen on c6 and levying a check on the king on e7. This position mostly sort of crumbled into my hands. Bishop takes f6 and then g takes f6 when we follow with rook takes f6. It feels like white has found the one seam that keeps the entire dress intact and is intent on pulling that seam. All these other moves are just sort of happenstance out of a crumbling position. Queen takes e6 and then knight to c7 check will win the queen. We can see that, of course, but make this more direct, complete, whatever. And then here I have an let's see, I have a queen to a rook. Everything else is equal, or even in terms of material. I just decide to keep my opponent's trump, the two rooks on the 8th rank. Keep them there. If that's your opponent's best thing, keep them there. So I went for checkmate pretty much right away. I don't know if I solved it in the fewest moves, but I definitely got a forced mate here. And that was checkmate. It felt really good to win that game. I found some good moves under pressure, including a few blue moves and a turquoise move. So yeah, I was happy about that. We wanted to review. Oh, this is a game that could have occurred probably with a different move at some point along the game that actually occurred. That's fun. And it was super accurate and everything. But what ifs are fun if you're learning from them. I wouldn't emphasize them too much to a budding or learning chess player. They're fun. You don't want to read too much more into them than that. Then it's fun to do, and you're learning. Fun and learning. That's enough. Hey, good day. All right. Okay, I think that's all for this session, folks. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Have a great night.